A 2024 study found that 72% of people feel stuck, whether it's in their careers, relationships, or personal growth. But here's the shocking part: it's not your fault, it's actually your brain. You are biologically wired to resist change, even the changes you deeply desire, because your brain resists anything unfamiliar, even if it's healing, success, or happiness, because to your brain, it can feel like a threat. But the good news is you can rewire your brain to get unstuck. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how. Hi, I'm Christy, a board certified nurse practitioner, health coach, and trauma survivor. This is Trauma Free, where I help you change your mind and change your life, just like I did. And in today's video, we're diving deep into the powerful but invisible forces that keep you stuck in the same thoughts, habits, and choices, no matter how much you want to change. So if you've been wondering, why do I keep repeating the same patterns? Or why does this change feel so hard, even when I want it? You're about to get the answers and the tools so you don't continue to fall for the same traps. So let's get into it. Let me show you what's really going on when you feel stuck, because this isn't about your willpower, it's about your wiring. We've been told that getting unstuck is just about discipline, hustle, or better routine. But if you've ever felt like something is pulling you backwards, even when you're trying to move forward, there's a reason. And that's because negativity bias, your brain's survival filter. Think of your brain like a security system because it's trained to detect danger and not dreams. Because of our outdated tendency towards survival that we once needed to stay alive, but this causes us to be 5 times more likely to focus on what went wrong than what's going right. And this has detrimental effects because negative experiences have greater psychological impact than positive ones on our moods, memories, and behaviors. It's been shown that people remember failures 3 times more vividly and for longer than successes. Imagine if you get great feedback at work, saying you have fantastic leadership, you're reliable, and focused. But then there's one line that says could improve time management, and suddenly your head drops. You replay that one sentence for days, but that's not you overreacting. That's your amygdala hijack, your brain's emotional alarm system that reacts twice as strongly to potential threats as it does to praise. But here's where it gets deeper. MRI studies show that negative experiences actually lay down thicker myelin sheaths on certain neural pathways, which means your brain builds stronger, faster connections for fear, failure, and self-doubt unless you consciously choose otherwise. Think of it like this: the more your brain runs the same fearful thought, the smoother and faster that connection becomes, because the brain is plastic, so you can change it. You can build new pathways, but first you need to understand why the old ones feel so automatic. So if you've ever thought, why do I only remember what went wrong? Why can't I stop replaying that one mistake? Or why do I spiral even when I'm trying to stay positive? It's not your mindset, it's your brain's default mode. But default patterns can be rewired. Change isn't just uncomfortable, it's neurologically threatening. That's why even when we crave something better, we stay stuck in situations that drain us. So let's talk about something we've all felt but rarely name. You know when your relationship isn't working, or you're underpaid, undervalued, and unfulfilled, or you need to start that thing or leave that thing. So why don't you? Because your brain isn't wired for happiness, it's wired for familiarity. And that's due to the status quo bias. The familiar feels safer than the fulfilling because your brain's number one job is survival, not satisfaction. The brain equates familiar with safety, even if that familiar situation is uncomfortable, toxic, or soul-sucking. So you stay in that job you dread. You maintain relationships that cost more than they give. You scroll instead of sleep. And you put off goals until the next day. Not because you don't care, but because the default mode network in your brain reinforces existing beliefs and behaviors 47% of the time, even if they no longer serve you. That means nearly half your day, your brain is running on autopilot, repeating thoughts, decisions, and habits simply because they're familiar. But research has shown that changing small environmental cues like your phone placement, room lighting, or your commute path can disrupt autopilot thinking and boost intentional behavior by 60%. So you don't stay because you like it, you stay because your brain knows what to expect there. And this is the power of the status quo bias. Your brain's deep preference for what it already knows, even if it's hurting you. Now, let's talk about inertia bias. This is the psychological tendency to keep things as they are, simply because changing them requires more mental effort. Even when the desire to change is so strong, the energy to change feels so out of reach because your brain weighs potential losses more heavily than gains. It also avoids regret at all costs. So instead of making a move, it just freezes. And there are three forces keeping you stuck in inertia bias. The first is loss aversion. We fear loss twice as much as we value potential gain, which causes you to think, what if I leave and it gets worse? Then there's regret avoidance, where you think if I change and it fails, I'll blame myself forever. So you avoid the risk of regret by making no decision at all. And lastly, cognitive overload. You feel like you're overwhelmed, so you'll decide later, but later becomes never, and the cycle continues. Brain scans of people who feel chronically stuck showed reduced prefrontal cortex activity, the area responsible for decision making, planning, and forward thinking. And when being stuck becomes chronic, it triggers a 37% increase in cortisol, your primary stress hormone. And that's the same physiological impact as being in a toxic relationship. So let that process. Staying stuck isn't just frustrating, it's chemically altering your body. You may have heard of inertia in physics, which is how objects at rest stay at rest. But there's something even more powerful at work inside your brain, and that's neuroinertia. It's what keeps you repeating old patterns, even when they're making you miserable. Because neuroinertia is your brain's biological resistance to change. It's not just mental hesitation or emotional discomfort. It's a chemical and structural phenomenon when your neural pathways defend the status quo. Imagine your brain like a snowy hill. The more you slide down the same path, which would be habits, thoughts, and beliefs, the deeper the grooves become. Eventually, it's hard not to go that way. So when you start to try something new, like starting a business, setting a boundary, or a bold move, your brain resists because your neurons are wired to go down that same familiar path. It has been shown that the brain uses less glucose or energy when repeating known patterns and habits, which means it rewards you for staying in the familiar, even if the familiar is dysfunctional. So when you attempt to break ingrained habits, it triggers the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, the part of your brain associated with error detection and the threat response. This is why change can feel really scary, even when it's good for you. But the good news is, once you push through the initial discomfort and repeat the new pattern, neuroplasticity kicks in and it starts to shift. Think about trying to wake up earlier. Day 1, you snooze the alarm. Day 2, you press snooze again and feel guilty. Day 3, you wake up but feel groggy and irritable. Your brain interprets that discomfort as danger and tells you, let's go back to what we know. So you sleep in again. This is neuroinertia in action, but you can override it with micro shifts. Instead of taking on massive goals, because small, consistent changes signal safety, so change one routine cue and repeat it daily. Also, labeling the resistance can help recognize when you experience neuroinertia, because studies show that labeling internal resistance reduces its power by up to 40%. You can also use dopamine strategically by rewarding the effort and not just the outcome. Each time you take a step, celebrate it. This rewires the brain to seek repetition of the new behavior. You can also interrupt the pattern by physically changing your environment. You can stand up, change rooms, or step outside. Because movement breaks the neural loop and gives your prefrontal cortex or your decision making part of your brain space to re engage. And visualize your future self because visualization activates the same neural circuits as physical practice. By mentally rehearsing your future behavior, you start rewiring your brain before change even happens. You can't escape your past, but you can rewrite how your brain stores it. You're not stuck because of what happened. You're stuck because of how your brain saved it. Your memories aren't just facts, they're emotionally coded patterns, but those patterns aren't permanent. Every time you recall a memory, it becomes changeable for a few hours, just like a Word doc you've reopened. You can edit the emotional meaning and add new insight and hit save. That's memory reconsolidation, the brain's natural mechanism to update emotional memories with new context, clarity, or compassion. So you may initially remember that job interview was a disaster. You sounded unprepared and you know you aren't going to get it. But if you reframe that in reconsolidation, you would say that that interview taught me how to own my story and speak from my strengths. When you add new meanings, your brain rewires the emotional tags attached to the memory. This reduces shame, fear, and resistance. So the memory no longer dictates your present because emotional memories can be neutralized by pairing what you recall with new information while in a calm state. So when you've been hurt, your brain tags similar experiences with danger. That's why even talking about trying again can cause stress, procrastination, or you shutting down. Your brain isn't trying to punish you, it's trying to protect you because it uses past pain to forecast future risks. So if you want a new future, you have to manually override the previously stored data. Dopamine is not just the pleasure chemical. It's the motivation molecule. It rewards repetition, it fuels momentum, and most importantly, it follows association. So if fear is associated with action, your brain resists. But if reward is associated with action, even something small, your brain leans in. I used to dread going hiking. Now I go almost every weekend because afterwards I would reward myself with a good meal from somewhere I enjoyed eating. Now my brain associates hiking with my lifestyle, resilience, and reward. This is dopamine override. You pair the unfamiliar or uncomfortable with something pleasurable or grounding. Over time, this rewires the neural circuit and makes difficult things feel easier. You can reprogram your reality by recalling and reframing with memory reconsolidation. Pick one limiting memory, revisit it in a calm state, and change the internal narrative by asking yourself, what did that experience teach me? How did I grow? And what would I say to my younger self? Do this during a walk, a meditation, or journaling session when the brain is most open to rewiring. Try stacking dopamine by creating micro rewards. Attach something you enjoy, like I did with hiking, to a habit you resist. If you're scared to pitch yourself, treat yourself to your favorite meal afterwards. If you're nervous about networking, light your favorite candle while you prepare for strategic reinforcement. You can also create positive emotional anchors, using your senses to build new emotional memories. Use smells like lavender, coffee, or citrus because the olfactory bulb or the smell center has a direct line to the amygdala and hippocampus, so scents can rewire emotional memory faster than almost anything. Use music by creating a focused playlist or soothing binaural beats, and use visuals like a vision board or affirming post-it notes to keep you anchored. And lastly, try visualizing the win. Don't just imagine the outcome, feel the process, because the brain often confuses vivid imagination with lived experience. The more emotionally real it feels, the faster the brain rewires for it. You don't have to erase your past. You just need to retrain your brain to tell a new story about it. Here's the truth. Your environment is always programming your brain. So why not design it to support who you're becoming? You don't have to willpower your way to change. You can create it because your brain is constantly absorbing signals from your surroundings, cues, colors, sounds, and smells, even the way your furniture is arranged. And whether you realize it or not, those inputs shape your habits, moods, energy levels, and decisions. The most successful people in the world don't have more discipline. They have better systems, ones that make growth the default and not the exception. So start by rearranging your workspace, by disrupting cognitive autopilot routines that can either stabilize you or keep you stuck. When you're in the same environment, doing the same thing the same way, your brain kicks into default mode. You stop questioning your behavior, you stop innovating, and you stop expanding. But even simple changes like facing your desk in a different direction, adding plants, or standing instead of sitting can break the loop and rearrange executive function because environmental changes increase dopamine and prefrontal activity linked to creativity and motivation. Try creating decision zones to reduce analysis paralysis. Ever feel mentally exhausted by 2 p.m., even if you haven't done much? That's decision fatigue, and it drains your cognitive power faster than running a sprint. Decision zones are designated spaces or times for certain types of decisions. Think of them like lanes on a highway, so your brain knows when to focus and when to coast. This could be Sunday planning time to make all weekly food, outfits, and workout decisions, a quiet corner for journaling and emotional processing, or a no phone zone to reduce dopamine hijacks and increase clarity. And use the nudge theory by making the desired behavior the easiest choice. Nudge theory is based on the idea that people will almost always take the path of least resistance. So change the path. Instead of forcing motivation, design the environment so the healthiest or most helpful option is the easiest to access. So if you want to read more, put a book on your pillow in the morning so it's the last thing you see at night. Want to meditate? Leave your yoga mat unrolled and set a reminder on your phone. And if you want to eat better, prep your fridge like a salad bar and have bad snacks out of your sight and harder to reach. You can also use cognitive offloading by freeing your brain from holding too much at once. Use external systems like checklists, reminders, habit apps, or sticky notes to offload mental clutter and reduce feeling overwhelmed. Because offloading reduces cortisol levels by 23% and improves memory recall. And leverage the Zeigarnik effect because the brain is biologically driven to finish what it starts. So starting even just 5 minutes activates mental tension loops that pull you back to complete that task because being done is addictive, but starting is powerful. Use this bias in your favor. So begin, even imperfectly, and your brain will do the rest. Remember, you're not stuck. You're simply running on a loop, a feedback system created by your past, your environment, and your brain's need for safety. But cycles can be interrupted and redesigned. You are not the product of your past. You're the architect of your future. So let me know what's one area of your life where you feel stuck and what tiny shift can you make to support a change. And if this resonated, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. And until next time, take care.